Right folks, so we've arrived at the gravel road. Now it's time to deflate the tires. It's gravel road, so it's 85%. Speaking of tire pressures, while I'm busy deflating the tires, why don't you have a gander at all the different tire pressures for all the different terrain? Tire pressures, folks. Well, there's a lot of conflict about certain tire pressures and for certain terrain and so forth. Not as much. There's a very big consensus about certain ranges, as it were. So I went out and I did all the research. I've looked to try and find as much information I could find on the internet and on YouTube and everywhere about tire pressures and terrain and all that stuff. And there's one critical thing that needs to be kept in mind that sometimes is forgotten, and that is the fact that saying that, say for instance now rocky terrain, most people will say, we're working in bars now, most people will say between 1.5 and 1.7, that's your ideal place. The problem is, what about the guy with a chimney whose maximum tire pressure is 1.7? So if he deflates now to 1.5, is he at the same place that you are with your 1.5 on your 17 inch? So that's where the conflict came from me. And not all tires are made the same, and not all manufacturers want you to inflate the maximum tire pressure or the running tire pressure at the same as the next vehicle. Although they're the same weight and everything, there's still some critical differences. So what I went and did is I took all that information I got. I found it in different formats, pounds per square inch, bar, you name it. I found it all, converted it all back to bar, and then what I did is, using a simple formula, I created percentages, right? Because if it's in a percentage, it's easier, because now it doesn't matter the size of the vehicle, doesn't matter the maximum tire pressure your vehicle uses or the manufacturer tire pressure that they recommend. Doesn't matter what that is, you use the manufacturer's tire pressure, the maximum tire pressure, as your maximum. And then from there, whatever percentage you need to be at for whatever terrain you need to be at, then you just deflate to that percentage using a formula. And I'm going to show you how that formula works. One or two things to also keep in mind using that. Cold pressures. I'm not talking about inflating your tire after you've driven 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers, inflating your tire to manufacturer specs. I'm talking about cold pressure. I'm talking about your vehicle has slept overnight, the next morning you arrive at the vehicle and you check your tire pressures, and that cold pressure is what your tire pressure should be at, and that's what is recommended on the tire as well. There might be with different tires, different types of tires or different specs have that you inflated at different times, but generally the consensus is cold tire pressure, that's the one you work with. A few more things. Loaded or unloaded also plays a factor in this. It's not as simple. You just a loaded vehicle is going to behave much differently than a vehicle that is not loaded. So your tire pressures need to be adapted for that as well. So the terrain and speed you're going to be traversing is also important. You need to bear in mind what you're going to do. Are you going to be loaded or not loaded? Are you doing overlanding or are you just going out for a day trip? All these things play a role. So I use the averages of the brackets from within what I got the information from, because not everybody says the same thing. One guy says 1.5, one guy says 1.56, next guy says 1.57, next guy says 1.6. So what I did is I made a bracket, took the average of that, and that I used as the go-to pressure. You can always deflate it by a margin or inflate it by a margin depending on what you feel you need to do or how the vehicle behaves on the terrain. But that bracket, that average percentage, I gave to you. There's also parts where there's a larger bracket, so I'll give you a percentage between 70% and 80%, and you inflate or deflate according to, once again, the terrain that you are traversing. So the absurd pressures that I got I ignored. I mean, one guy says, yeah, you must inflate it to 4 bar to travel on gravel road. Believe it or not, there are such crazy pressures going out there. People telling people that that's what you should do. So those were ignored. I took the obviously absurd ones out, and I just took all of the pressures, and believe me, it was quite easy. There's the ones that are way over or way under, and those are few and far between. The consensus is rather narrow, so you know it's not that hard to try and get a certain pressure. Right, so I've divided terrain up into 7. Right, so first will be asphalt. So asphalt will be 100%. That's it. That 100% equals cold pressure. Your manufacturer, that it says in the door, when you open the door, there's a little panel there that says what your pressure should be. Now that will be laden or unladen. Laden will be loaded up to GVM or up to, it doesn't mean it has to be. The moment that you load some weight up, let's say 200 and above, then you'd rather want to put it on laden pressure. But then that pressure will be your running pressure. That will also be your reference. So if you are going out on a trip, that pressure that you inflated that morning before you leave, laden pressure, that is your pressure that you work on for the rest of your trip. That is called your control. So next up we've got fast gravel. Now, fast gravel will be any hard-packed, non-asphalt surface that you could easily do 100 to 120 kilometers, even 140 kilometers an hour. A high-speed gravel or hard-packed surface. Now, I'm not condoning or saying that you should do that speed on any gravel or surface that is not asphalt. Doing that above 80 kilometers an hour, you're putting your life in your hands. Something goes wrong, that car swerves left and right, you're lost. Even driving in 4x4, there's been accidents on gravel roads. Guys have their vehicles in 4x4 and they still have crashed because they can't control the vehicle because they're used to driving unladen. And normally if they're going on a trip or a route, then the vehicle is loaded. And that the behavior of the vehicle changes completely. And that's what catches some people. And the moment you have to swerve for something that's in the road, you try to recover, doesn't always go well, and then you sit with an issue. So 80 kilometers an hour, doesn't matter how nice the surface is. Don't be tempted to go faster. Another reason why you don't go faster than 80 kilometers an hour is that there's an idea going that when you drive, if you go faster than 80 kilometers an hour, the front wheel picks up the rocks, alright, and the rear wheel tramples over them. If you go faster than 80 kilometers an hour, those rocks don't have time to drop down and fall before the rear wheel goes over them. So if you pick up a flat or a sharp rock and it goes up, the back wheel is over it before it can drop, and that's why you get flat tires. And that's why 90%, you can even think for yourself, you can say, I've driven this road 120 kilometers, I've never gotten a flat. You're lucky, you're very lucky. Other guys do that same road, do 120 kilometers an hour, and they get flat after flat after flat after flat. And they don't know why. And they say, no, it's the tires, this is bad tires. It's not the tires, it's you misbehaving on the road. You shouldn't be going that fast. And if you go 80 kilometers an hour, I can guarantee you, you will get up to 80 to 90% less chances of having a flat on that same gravel road. So pressure for fast gravel roads, 85%. Now you can play with that, you can bring it down a bit, you can take it up a bit depending on how you feel. You want the car to ride a bit softer, or if you want to, if it feels too squishy for you because you're loaded or so. But 85%, that's more or less that you work it on. Then slow gravel. Slow gravel, 70%. Also, small margin up above or below, you can play around with that. I wouldn't go lower than 70% because you need to bear in mind your sidewall. Your sidewall, because it compresses that much, even on corrugations and stuff like that, that sidewall gets very soft. And if you want life out of your tire, if you want your tire still to give you 80, maybe 100,000 kilometers, then you are going to have to bear that in mind. And going lower than that, you are damaging the sidewall. Your sidewall gets hot, and that rubber gets almost like vulcanized in a way on the inside, and it slowly but surely erodes from the inside. You won't see it from the outside, but you'll see it'll happen on the inside. Hard packed sand, 70%. You could go lower to 60%. You could even go down to 50% if you want to. But hard packed sand, 70% is good. That gives you a good ratio for maintaining your momentum and not having the car bounce around too much and so on. Once again, it's sand. If you know that you are going to get soft patches in between, rather deflate it to your soft tire pressure for sand, for soft sand, so that you know that you don't struggle through those bits. So rather work on the lighter side. Soft pack sand, you can go down as far as 33%. And going lower than that, you could, hypothetically, if you don't have bead lockers, which means that the rim actually pinches the bead of the tire and prevents it from climbing off. If you don't have those, going lower than 33%, you're taking a chance. If you're going to have to swerve out the way for something, or you're going to make some sharp turns, you could have the sand climbing in between the rim and the tire, and then having the tire jump off. And then you're sitting with a... So yeah, 33% will be safe. You can still do some reasonably sharp turns and you should be okay. Rocky terrain, 45 to 70%. That's the bracket that you work in. You could go down as low as 45% and you can go up to 70%. Depends on the terrain. You get different types of rocky terrain. You get hard surface underneath with some gravel and rocks, loose rocks and stuff on top, which is relatively good because most of the time the solid surface is exposed, and then you don't have to go down that low. You could take it down to only to 70% and you should be fine. Just bear in mind your tire might still be a little bit hard, and take your time. Don't go fast over a road that you know you shouldn't be going fast, because once again, sharp rocks, you're going a bit fast, those sharp rocks stick through the wheels, and that'll happen to the front or the rear if your tire pressure is too hard for very rocky terrain. Down to 45% will be determined by what that surface is. If it's very loose gravel and stone, you rather want to bring it down quite a bit, because you don't want to damage the terrain, you don't want to damage the route any further. Most of the times you're probably going out to doing some eco route or something like that, and you don't want to completely dig holes and make it even worse for the guy following you. So bear that in mind, rather deflate a bit. Also bear in mind, go a lot slower, because your tire is that low, if you're going to hit a rock, a sharp rock or an edge of a step at too much of a speed, you could pinch the rim between the tire and you could damage the tire, and you have a deflate and you have to sit in the bush and put new tires on. So rather, once again, go as slow as you can, as fast as necessary. To be on the safe side, 55% will be a good measure. You should be able, with 55%, be able to do almost any type of terrain safely with reasonably good clearance, because remember, you deflate your tire, you lose some clearance. A reasonably good clearance and sufficient traction. You wouldn't necessarily need to go further down than that, but as I said, terrain dependent. Mud. Now mud was a bit difficult to narrow down, because people say you treat mud the same as you do sand, and that's not completely true. Mud behaves differently, and mud tends to climb in between the rim and the tire much easier because it's more in a liquid form than sand is. So you have that, it acts like a lubricant basically. So it's not that simple, it's not that clear cut. What I went and I did is I went and I got a safe bracket, where you can have it anywhere on these pressures and you should be safe, you should be alright, depending on the type of mud. Once again, if you get really sticky, mushy mud, that pressure is different to having some mud that's only on the surface. We have solid like clay ground below and some clay mud on top. That's a bit different. So in that case, you want your pressure a bit high. You want the tire to bite through that mud and bite onto the hard surface below it. Where soft, mushy mud, you want to deflate the tire quite sufficiently, so you have more traction, so that your surface area of your tire is larger, so that you can bite better through in the mud. So your flotation, as it were, is a bit better. So the brackets, 45 to 70, same as rocks. Your safe percentage in between is about 60%. If you put in 60%, you can do mud. doesn't matter which. You'll see when you drive, you'll feel that the car feels like it's struggling. Maybe your tire pressure is too hard and you are driving in mud that's too soft. Deflate it a bit. Play with those brackets, but in between that bracket you should be fine. 45 and 70%. Right, so if you want to calculate your percentage or your tire pressure, it's simple. You take the manufacturer's tire pressure, that cold pressure that you had. Say you had an unladen vehicle or a laden vehicle. You take that tire pressure given by the manufacturer, you divide that by 100, and then you times it by the percentage that you need. Alright, so say like on Navaras and Pathfinders, their pressures is 2.4, divided by 100 gives you 0.024, times that by the percentage, let's say 50%, that's 1.2 bar. So, simple as that. Other thing you could do is make yourself a little placard, put these pressures up. I'll link in a photo or something. You put the pressures up, you laminate it, and you stick it somewhere in your car. Then you don't even have to think about it. You drive, you say, okay, right, I'm going into mud this morning. What's my mud pressure? You check my pressure, deflate the tires, and there you go. Running pressure again, laden, unladen. You put all that information on a small little laminated placard, just in your window or your somewhere in your vehicle, under the visor or something, and you should be fine. Alright, so this morning I filled up a 2.4 bar. This is where we're at now. It's almost 2.8 it seems. Alright, so now you can get one of those fancy deflators and so on, but this works just as well. It takes a little bit longer. Check. Five. We want to be around 2 bar. 2. That looks just about right. Just over 2 bar is fine with me. All this times 4. Alright folks, tires deflated. Let's get on the road. Right, so first things first, let's get this guy in 4x4. Now we're ready to go. Right folks, on the gravel road about 15.6 kilometers, you'll find the Pinaarspoort sign. Now here you turn left. Be careful not to miss it, and also be aware that after you've made this turn, the road goes through a little bit of a kloof, and the roads are very bendy, and you might miss a vehicle coming from the front if you can't see the dust, if it was rainy or something like that. So bear that in mind. Be careful on this road. There's also corrugation start getting a little bit rougher here, and yeah, if your vehicle is not yet in 4x4, make sure that it is. After another 15.6 kilometers, turn left at this T-junction, but as you've seen, be aware of vehicles moving at high speed across this road. So after about 3.8 kilometers, turn right at the Gatsrivier board, which you will find on your left. It's a little bit obscured, but you will notice it coming up on the turn. Folks, this is also where the gates start. Now these gates are either closed or open for a reason, and whichever condition you find them in, leave them in that same condition as you've passed through. It's to prevent livestock from moving between the farms, and if you leave a gate open, that means livestock are free to roam around, and they might damage property, and they might even hurt other animals. So please folks, leave it as you found it. So a couple of kilometers from the turnoff, we start getting into this windy bit, and you might think that, did I miss a turnoff somewhere? Did I take the wrong gate? Don't worry, you're still on the right route. Just enjoy the scenery and go carefully through these little driffies and so on. But yeah, now we start getting closer to Gatsrivier and closer to what this whole series is about.
the Meisonberg Pass. Now it's slow going, and you might still feel like you are not on the right road, but I tell you, the reward at the top is stunning. 3/4 of the way up, pull over or stay in the center of the road even. I mean, no cars will either come from the rear or from the front, and just have a cool drink and look at that view. It's something out of a storybook. If you have some binoculars, you can actually trace the route you've been driving back for quite a distance. The Karoo is just one of those places.